For 9 months, Mill kept comparing my pregnancy, which wasn't perfect, to Syl's, which seemed perfect. After Syl had her baby, both she and my husband stopped talking to Mill. My husband and I have been married for more than 2 years, and we've been together for 7. He's incredible, truly the man I've always dreamed of, and I'm living a wonderful life with him. My Mexican family adores him, and I've never heard anyone say they don't like him. He treats everyone with respect, which is one of the things that made me fall in love with him. We hardly ever argue, except when it comes to his mom. Mill is a nightmare, to put it mildly. My husband's family is much smaller than mine. Besides his parents, he only has a sister who got married last year. His parents are typical conservative Christians from a small town, and his mom is super protective, almost too much. She likes to be in charge and insists we spend holidays together as a family. If we don't follow her wishes, she throws a fit. When I met my husband's family for the first time, his dad and I got along fine. He was easygoing and quiet. His sister, who had been away at college in another state, and returned only 2 years ago, and I hit it off right away. She treats me like her own sister. But his mom was a different story. She would say really old-fashioned and sexist things to me. For instance, when they asked about my job, I told them I was a marine biologist, working to protect sea animals. My husband's dad thought it was great, but his mom didn't seem happy and didn't say anything to me. I didn't think much of it at the time, but later my husband's dad, Phil, called him to say that Mill wanted him to end our relationship. Phil said Mill thought I wasn't the right kind of woman for her son because I had a job. She thought I should act more like a traditional woman and stay at home. But I love my job as a scientist, and my husband has never wanted me to be a housewife or have a stereotypical woman's job. If he did, we wouldn't be together. But his mother was stuck on the idea that he needed someone different. She worried that with my well-paying job, I might not want to be a housewife after we got married. She believed he should have found a better match. When my husband heard this, he firmly told his dad to tell his mom that who he chooses to marry is none of her business. I was relieved he stood up for me. It showed me he was a good partner, which is why I didn't end things right then and there after hearing what his mom thought of me. Unfortunately, as our relationship got more serious, Mill's attitude towards me got worse. Despite my husband's efforts to protect me, she started making snide comments here and there. Whenever we were alone, she'd find a way to bring up how she believed a good wife should stay home and take care of the house. She also hinted that I didn't look like the right woman for my husband because I'm not very feminine and might not be able to have children. At first, I thought she was joking, but when she kept saying it, I realized she was serious, and I was shocked by her narrow-minded thinking. One day, we were at Mill's house for dinner because she insisted we come over. During the meal, she started going on about how she missed the old days when women stayed home and men went out to work. My husband joked that times have changed, and he's grateful to have me as a partner because we both work and share household duties. Mill didn't like that and said men and women should stick to traditional roles. I knew she was targeting me, but I tried to stay calm. Phil tried to calm her down and said it wasn't the time for that discussion. But she got upset that he wasn't on her side. She kept saying she was just speaking the truth and wanted what's best for her son. Then she looked at me. I'd had enough, so I quietly asked my husband to take me home, which he agreed to. He looked disappointed in his mom as we left. Later, when Phil called to patch things up, I told him firmly that Mill shouldn't decide who her son marries and she should stop making unnecessary jabs about my job. Phil tried to apologize for Mill's behavior, but I wasn't ready to accept it. My husband backed me up and told his dad that if Mill didn't apologize, he wouldn't visit her again. Maybe that scared her because she eventually apologized to me, and I asked her not to bring it up again, which she agreed to. So I let that situation go. But a few months later, when my husband and I were living together before getting married, I had to go on a research trip for a few weeks. Mill found out and called me, asking who would take care of the house and her son. I was puzzled by her questions and put her on speaker so my husband could hear. I asked her what she meant, and she started saying I needed to be more mature now that I was living with her son. She insisted I shouldn't go on these trips and should focus on being a good partner to him. My husband got angry and told her he didn't need anyone to take care of him, and we were equal partners who shared responsibilities. She got upset and said we couldn't get married because I didn't know how to be a proper wife. My husband told her to mind her own business and hung up. When he proposed to me, Mill wasn't happy. She got even more upset when she learned we wanted a small wedding. With my large family, it would be expensive to invite everyone, especially since we were also planning to move into our own place. So I decided to invite only close family members and plan to celebrate with the others later. But Mill argued with my husband, insisting she wanted to invite all her old friends she hadn't seen in a while. When my husband asked if she would pay for their meals if we agreed, she got offended and said he should be ashamed as her son. Even though we both earned well, we were surprised by her response and firmly reiterated our decision to have a small wedding. We made it clear that if she invited any uninvited guests, she would be responsible for their expenses. Mill didn't like this, but she couldn't change our minds. During the wedding, she loudly complained about everything and openly expressed her dislike for my wedding gown. I chose to ignore her comments and acted as if she wasn't there because I didn't want her mean words to ruin my day. Sil, seeing this, tried her best to keep Mill away from me for the rest of the evening, trying to protect me from her negativity. Last year, around mid-April, we got the wonderful news that I was pregnant after trying for a while. We waited until I was about 9 weeks along before sharing the news with our close family and friends. My Mill was upset that she wasn't the first to know. She called me to express her disappointment, saying she had every right to know first as my husband's mother. I explained that we wanted to wait before sharing such important news and suggested she talk to my husband if she had complaints. Just a month after we announced my pregnancy, Sil told us she was pregnant too. We were surprised but happy for her. This meant there would be 2 new additions to our family. Sil wasn't married yet, but had a serious long-term boyfriend we had all met. As expected, Mill made a fuss about Sil being pregnant before marriage. However, my husband supported his sister, and eventually, Mill accepted it. Phil was overjoyed at the thought of having 2 grandchildren at once and became quite emotional about it. S and I grew closer as we navigated our pregnancies together, finding comfort and support in each other during this both magical and challenging time. We leaned on one another for advice and companionship, sharing the journey of preparing for our babies. We shopped for baby items together and planned our nurseries. However, Mill began to compare my pregnancy with Sil's out of the blue, as if it were a competition. She would make remarks suggesting that Sil was better suited to be a mother because she had always been a homemaker, unlike me with a job. She'd make snide comments about differences in our pregnancies, like if I experienced more morning sickness. She'd imply that Sil was having an easier time carrying her baby. Despite trying to ignore her comments, they bothered me, and Sil felt the same way. When it was time for my gender reveal party, I asked Sil to find out the baby's gender from the doctor and prepare the envelope. She did the same for her own party. Mill was furious when she found out about this and had a major meltdown. She showed up at our doorstep yelling that I was trying to keep her away from her grandchild by not letting her plan the reveal. She insisted my husband should intervene and let her be more involved in my pregnancy. My husband didn't like the way she was talking to me, so he told her to leave or she'd be cut off from our grandchild's life. She made a scene, crying and saying she only wanted the best, but eventually left. Later, Phil and Sil called us concerned about Mill's behavior, so we had to tell them what happened. Sil was shocked and advised me to rest after dealing with Mill's yelling. During Christmas, my husband informed his mother that we couldn't make it due to my inability to travel long distances. She was angry and accused him of avoiding family. When he stood firm, she hung up. We thought she understood, but a week later, she texted insisting we come over at 4:00 p.m. My husband reminded her we weren't coming, but she called and yelled at him, accusing me of influencing his decision. He clarified it was our choice, and she started screaming again about him needing to control me. I started noticing how controlling and toxic Mill was getting, and I'd talk about it with my husband and Sil. They agreed she was going too far, but dealing with her was draining. When it was time to have the baby, we didn't have time to let everyone know because I went into early labor at 33 weeks. Our baby boy was born at 34 weeks by emergency C-section after trying to have a natural birth didn't work. After making sure both the baby and I were okay, my husband announced our son's birth in the family group chat and let my family know. Everyone was thrilled and busy congratulating me, but Mill had another breakdown because we hadn't told her I was in labor or that the baby was born. She bombarded us with texts, saying she should have been there in the delivery room to see her grandchild being born. It was ridiculous. I didn't bother correcting her delusions because I wouldn't have let her in the delivery room anyway. When we announced our son's name, she called my husband crying, saying it sounded too Mexican and suggesting a different name. We didn't listen, but she kept fussing about it. When she met our son, she insisted on calling him a different name, which surprised us. She tried to justify it as her special nickname for him, but my husband told her to stop. She also doesn't like that I breastfeed my son because it means I have to take him away from her. She suggested I switch to formula so she could spend more time with him. My mother, who was also there, explained that breast milk is important for a newborn, but Mill kept arguing it wasn't fair. Her teasing and controlling behavior were getting worse and more obvious to everyone. The breaking point came when she invited me to lunch, claiming she had something important to discuss. I tried to cancel several times, but she insisted we meet. At the lunch, she was friendly at first. Then she asked who we'd chosen as our son's godfather. I knew she wouldn't like my answer. I explained that S and I had decided to be each other's children's godparents. Mill began crying loudly in the middle of the restaurant and shouted at me for choosing S as our son's godfather. She said S already had her family and that I should make her my son's godmother because, as his grandparent, she had every right to take care of him. I reminded her how she thought Sil was better suited for motherhood, so she should be happy that my son would be well cared for by her. But Mill insisted that only she could be trusted. Her demands were getting on my nerves, so I firmly told her we were done discussing it and suggested she talk to my husband about it later. I later told Sil about the lunch and she didn't like how Mill didn't want her to be our son's godparent. My husband didn't understand why Mill was acting this way and started ignoring her calls. Last week, Sil had her baby girl, and she asked me to be with her in the delivery room for support, which I gladly did. I stayed with her all night while my husband and mother looked after our son at home. The next morning, after Sil had her baby and her boyfriend took over, I went home to rest. Throughout the day, Mill called me, but I was too tired to talk and focused on my son. In the evening, my husband came back from checking on his sister, looking amused. I thought he was happy to meet his new niece, but he had even bigger news. He told me that Sil, fed up with Mill's toxic behavior, had decided to cut contact between Mill and her daughter. When Mill showed up unannounced at the hospital, Sil told the nurses not to let her in. Only Phil was allowed to meet the baby because Sil didn't want her mother's critical judgments. This was surprising, as I never expected Sil to stand up to Mill like this. It made me realize why Mill had been calling me all day. She might have been trying to blame me or convince me to persuade Sil to let her see the baby. When I talked to Sil, I learned that her decision came after seeing how Mill had treated me over the years. Going no contact was necessary to protect her daughter from Mill's toxic influence. It was a wake-up call for Mill, as she faced the consequences of her actions. The fallout has been tough, and Mill is completely cut off from her daughter's life, missing out on precious moments with her grandchild. Since then, I've been wondering if it's the right move for us to cut off Mill too. Would it be too harsh? Update 1. Hi everyone, I want to thank you all for your kind words and advice. It means a lot to me. I didn't expect this situation to grab attention so quickly. Since learning that Sil cut off Mill, my husband and I haven't spoken to her, despite her calls. After talking with my husband, we both agree it's best for our peace of mind to cut her out permanently. We worry she might treat our son the way she treated me. To those wondering why we waited so long, you have to understand my husband grew up in this toxic environment and didn't fully see how wrong it was until his mother started mistreating me. He's always supported and protected me, but his mother's behavior is too much. We had a video call with Sil and Phil to discuss our decision, and they're supportive. Now we just need to tell Mill. Update 2. Hold on to your seats, folks, because here comes the update. Yesterday evening, my husband decided to call his mother and break the news to her. As soon as she answered, she started yelling about how long it had been since they talked and demanding to meet our son right away. My husband stayed calm until she finished, then gently explained that he needed to take charge. Mill quickly agreed, thinking he was finally giving in to her wishes, but my husband stopped her, saying that as the head of our family, he had decided to cut her off to protect us from her toxic behavior. At first, Mill seemed stunned, trying to grasp what he said. When she realized the seriousness of our decision, she insisted on coming over to see her grandson, refusing to accept our choice. My husband firmly warned her that we wouldn't let her into our home and would call the police if she tried to trespass. She started screaming, blaming me for tearing the family apart. My husband had enough and told her he was done with her. But she kept yelling, saying he shouldn't have married me and that I was the reason for all this. Naturally, my husband was angry. He reminded her that Sil had also cut off contact, so the problem was clearly her, not me. But Mill kept arguing, saying I had influenced everyone against her and taken her children away. My husband finally had enough and told her to blame herself for being bitter and racist. He said we were all fed up with her and she needed to face her own actions. This silenced Mill, and he blocked her after their conversation. I did the same. I've also told my family not to answer Mill's calls for now. I feel sorry for my husband and Sil for not having a supportive mother, but I'm relieved I won't have to deal with such awful situations anymore. Update 3. It's been 2 months since my last update, and I'm pleased to say our son is thriving. Sil and I remain close, and our babies have regular playdates. It's heartwarming to see their bond, and I hope they stay best friends as they grow up. In more good news, Sil is getting married to her baby's father, as we all expected. Now onto the main update. We're still not in contact with Mill. For those concerned about our safety, we're fine. We've installed security cameras and changed our locks so Mill can't bother us. It's unlikely that she'll confront us publicly, considering many people know why we cut her off, and she must be embarrassed. After we stopped talking to her, she tried to get Phil to talk to us, but he refused and told her he was fed up with her too. Maybe hearing this from her own husband made her think because a few weeks later, she asked Phil to apologize to us on her behalf. I doubt her apology is genuine, so we're still not talking to her. Phil and my family still visit us and bond with our grandchild, and that's how it's going to be for now.